Exactly. Are developing countries going to hold back their development and condemn their people to avoidable poverty by removing relatively cheap energy to go on to relatively expensive energy? Who is going to do that?
Well, not only are they not going to do it, but I think it's profoundly immoral
To do it.
To try and persuade them to do it.
Yes. And that's what we're doing here. I mean, even if you move from coal to gas, you're not eliminating carbon dioxide emissions, even they just might be reducing them.
Yeah, you reduce them, and the shale gas revolution, which has made gas more abundant than it's ever been before. People who say we're running out of oil and gas, it's rubbish. We've never had so much gas, thanks to the shale gas revolution. That is a sensible thing to go for, because it's sensible in energy terms, it's sensible in economic terms, and it has the side effect that it does actually reduce the amount of emissions, if that is something which is important to you.
You have said for the foreseeable future, most forms of renewable energy are massively more expensive. Why? I do not understand why any government, and that is our government, would be striking a stake through the heart of our economic advantage, prospering the notion that renewable energy can replace the energy we currently enjoy from coal-fired power.
I have often wondered about that myself, and I think that part of the answer, it may not be the whole answer, it's all very complicated, but part of the answer is that it is wonderful for posturing politicians, because they are actually saying, look, forget about all the problems that we're meant to be fixing and we're not fixing, forget about all the day-to-day problems which beset you. We are saving the planet, and that's what really matters. So it's a kind of way to get away from their responsibilities which they ought to be discharging.
But then they also say, oh, well, hang on, I know jobs will be lost, but look at all the green jobs that will be created. Is that an economically illiterate position to be propagating?
It is completely illiterate, and there was a very good remark made by a French economist of the late 19th century, Frederick Bastiat, who said you might as well say you should go around breaking windows to create jobs for glaziers.
Yes, that's right. So I think you also said that the government can create jobs by employing large numbers of people to build statues of prominent politicians, you
That's
said.
right, yes.
But it's not necessarily economically advantageous.
Precisely.
So far as decarbonising the economy, you say the plain fact is the total economy will be harmed. You're talking to hundreds of thousands of Australians at the moment. What harm would we embrace if we embraced this notion of a carbon tax?
What you would be doing is you would be imposing a burden on your industries. You would be a burden on the people in general, and particularly the poor, and you would be harming the rate of economic growth, and therefore the rate at which people the country can become more prosperous, to no benefit whatever. I think that on the whole, if you get them into a corner, the ministers will admit that it could be damaging if it's on its own, but they say, well, look, we'll get a global agreement, and then everybody's going to do it, and we won't be at a relative disadvantage, and we will save the planet from global warming. Now, leave aside the saving the planet from global warming, because how much global warming there would be and how serious the results and consequences would be is very much open to question. But even on the first thing, there is not going to be a global agreement. They tried at Copenhagen 2 years ago and they couldn't do it. They tried at Cancun, this is under the United Nations auspices, a year ago and couldn't do it. And they're going to have another try in Durban, but now nobody in their right minds believes they're going to be able to do it. So there is going to be no global agreement. So it is crazy. If you said, which I've said to the British government they should be doing, say, okay, look, you've got your Climate Change Act. I think it's pretty silly, but at least if you don't want to go away from it, leave it on the statute book, but make it conditional on a global agreement.
But you've got the Australian Prime Minister here telling us, and the Australian electorate, I mean, it's addressed to the nation, that the science in relation to climate change and global warming is settled. Now, how is the average bloke going to work every day, driving in his car, listening to you? How's he meant to digest whether his Prime Minister is telling him the truth or not?
It's not difficult to know that that's not the truth. First of all, on the conventional wisdom on the science, I have founded, and I'm chairman of an outfit, a think tank in London called the Global Warming Policy Foundation. And I have an academic advisory council, a whole lot of distinguished academics. And three of them, for example, William Happer, who was a professor of physics at Princeton, one of the top physicists and most prestigious physicists in the world, Richard Lindzen, who is the professor of atmospheric physics at MIT, and he is probably the top climate science post in the world. Freeman Dyson, who is generally regarded as the most famous living scientist, physicist, mathematician, and so on. He's also at Princeton. All of them are on my academic advisory council, none of them by the conventional wisdom. So to say that the science is settled is manifestly absurd. But beyond that, of course, it is much more complicated because it goes in 3 stages which they try and obscure. First, is carbon dioxide a greenhouse gas, and therefore is it likely, if it increases, and it is increasing in the atmosphere, is it likely to warm the planet at all? Yes, it is. Most people would agree with that. There are a few who don't, but I'm not prepared to disagree with that. Next question, which is a huge question, well, how much will it warm it? And there's huge debate, huge uncertainty over that, not least because although the computer models predict a very substantial warming, and they thought it would accelerate, they predicted it would accelerate during the first 10 years of this century. In fact, there's been no further warming at all during the first 10 years of this century. So the computer models are clearly rubbish. So nobody knows how great the warming would be. Then the next question is such warming as there will be, is it likely to be harmful? And many aspects are beneficial for health. Warmth, it is definitely, even the United Nations bodies say, yeah, that's right, that warmth is better for health than cold. Cold-related diseases
as you say, rather be warm and rich than cold and poor.
Absolutely. And then the next thing is what are you going to do about it if there are any harmful effects? And obviously you do what people around the world have always done over the ages, you adapt to it. And that means if you adapt to it, that means you can reduce any harms that might come from any warming, and we don't know whether there will be, but there might be. And you can pocket all the benefits that come. So that is clearly the sensible way to go. And it's perfectly achievable. Each country will do its own thing. You don't need a global agreement, which even if it were agreed, which is not likely, wouldn't be enforceable, and you certainly don't need a carbon tax.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, in this so-called debate, and I congratulate Tom Switzer and his team now at The Spectator for prospering this debate that's going to take place tomorrow night. But you mentioned the eminence of people like Professor Richard Lindzen. I've spoken to this man several times on this program, which goes out to hundreds of thousands of people, but never once would one of the comments of Richard Lindzen be taken up by any person in government. They want to pretend these people don't exist.
That's right. That's right. It is. I have been in and around politics for a very long time now, because I'm a very, very old man. And I cannot recall, I mean, politicians have done all sorts of stupid things over that time, but I cannot remember, I cannot recall either anything quite as stupid as this, nor can I recall any time when politicians' words and deeds have been so different. But now, of course, what is the problem in Australia is, having made all these speeches, having made all these fine words, they are now, the government feels apparently incumbent to match the words with some deeds, and those deeds, I'm afraid, are likely to be very damaging indeed, as is the policy of the British government.
You talk, and just finally, about that Plan B, which is, of course, this plan of adaptation, which you say very sensibly is the way we ought to go, better to be warm and rich than cold and poor. But you then write this, which I found just a little amusing, and we might end it here, because you say, despite the overwhelming evidence of the Copenhagen debacle, it's not going to be easy to get our leaders to move to Plan B, which is the adaptation strategy. And then you say, there's no doubt that calling a halt to the high-profile climate change travelling circus risks causing a severe conference deprivation trauma amongst the participants. If there has to be, says Lord Lawson, if there has to be a small public investment in counselling, it would be money well spent. Do you think some of these people need a bit of old-fashioned counselling?
It looks like it, and and I think that that would be the only sensible policy to pursue.
It's lovely to talk to you. You can hear Lord Lawson tomorrow, the 3rd of August, at the Tattersalls Club in Sydney, a debate on the subject, do we really need this carbon tax? That's between 6 o'clock and 8:30, 181 Elizabeth Street, Tattersalls Club. It's got a peculiar website. Tom, I don't know what you've done here. www.stickytickets. Does that mean something, Lord Lawson, you think?
News to me.
Yes, to me. www.stickytickets.com.au/6064. My Lord, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
The former Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain, Lord Lawson. It's 25 and a half minutes to 8.